Please stand, join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to call the July 20th board meeting session, please. Ms. Terry, if you got to take the roll for us. Gentlemen, you have the agenda in front of you. I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion is second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Y'all been provided the minutes from the regular meeting on June the 8th and also the call board meeting on June the 18th. You've had time to look at those, and when you do, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the meetings.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move to discussion.
Yes, sir. Ms. Henley, actually, gentlemen, if you look at your agenda, Ms. Henley will be covering items 1, 2, and 3 under discussion.
Okay, so I believe my first item is the renewal of the Gold Kids Pilgrims Pride from 2 years ago. It's we process and divert chicken to go there and serve it to the kids. So that's my first item.
And that's that bid contract is renewal.
It's a renewal, yes, yes. There's a clause in the contract, it can be renewed up to 4 years. So the first year was 2 years ago, so this would be the second year, the second renewal. So do you guys have any questions on that or any clarification? We had done some renewals last month, this one just came in late. So my second is I would like to propose CEP, which we implemented at Moulton Branch and Clyattville 2 years ago. Lowndes Middle School and Lake Park now qualify, and which means that we could feed the kids at no cost, breakfast and lunch. We would pilot it this first year and see how we do, it would be a kind of unusual year, but I do believe that it would benefit. We have lots of room for growth because the participation is fairly low for breakfast at both schools. It's 31% and 38% Lowndes Middle and then Lake Park. And then for lunch, participation is 73% at Lowndes Middle and Lake Park is 67.5. So we have, and I usually try to accommodate maybe a 10 to 13% increase. So we have plenty of room for growth for those. And we've done well with the other two schools. And it just makes sense because those southern schools, the elementary schools feed into Lowndes Middle School.
Ms. Henley, tell them the minimum percentage in each of those schools is some 40%.
It's got to be 40% in order to qualify of directly certified students.
Tell them a little bit about
So people get confused. They think that it's the free students, which could be anything from income to students that receive food stamps, or they're homeless, or runaways, or migrant. These are just DC students, which is based upon SNAP or TANF. So it doesn't even include the students that are based on income, if that makes any sense, if you're familiar with it, where we get the applications for them. These actually come from the state, and it's a list that we get monthly. We import them in, and so we just happen to, they're over 40%. Now, we tried last time because it made sense to me to at least have the 4 southernmost schools be CEP, but financially it just wasn't feasible. So that is how you get it. So Lowndes Middle School is at 46% and Lake Park is at 43%. So I would really like you to consider that, and it helps on, it helps time, it helps cost, it helps the manager's time because she has to pre-qualify the applications. Cost for printing, it helps for charging. You know, if the student has to charge meals, there's no more charging. They don't have to collect money, which means the lines can flow a little bit faster, which I don't know how that's gonna look anyway this year with social distancing. So it would just benefit everybody all around. There's no stigmatism attached to it. So all the kids eat free, and nobody knows anybody's status, which sometimes can be an issue, especially in middle schools. And that's
Anybody have questions?
So that would give us 4 schools?
4 schools, yeah. Mhm.
And we will approach these two like we did a couple of years ago. This will initially be viewed as a pilot.
Yes.
As things go well, we'll evaluate it again in the spring for next year.
Yeah, and that would be based upon really participation. And lots of times the principals are very helpful in getting participation up and just with the parents when they know that their kids can eat free. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and I have one more. So my last one is our linen bid, which was due this year. We are going with UniFirst, which we've had for the last 5 years. Their prices have pretty much stayed the same. They put in there a clause for a 2% increase, but they really haven't even increased in the last few years. They're the only ones who sent back a bid. I sent it to 3 places, and they're the only ones who responded.
But the other two, I forgot the name of 2 other companies, but are those the same 2 companies we used when we did it out last time?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's very limited. There's really, yeah. Yeah, so I just went back and looked. I'm trying to think, when I was here before, I think there was Aramark that we had used years ago. But yeah, so these 2, at least one responded last time. I think it was the Georgia Linen Service, but Alsco did not respond at all. So.
You emailed all 3. And then
I did.
You hard mailed
The other 2, yes, because I didn't get a response from them. Yeah, so I thought, well, I'll go ahead and just meet a hard copy. So I did. Mhm.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, up next, item number 4 is finance report. Mr. Rosen.
Good evening, it's good to see everyone. Let's go ahead and get started on the June finance report. We're finishing up FY20. Take a look at your monthly summary, your first sheet. We'll take a look at that. Basically, you can see when you go all the way across under expenditures on the top column, you'll see payroll. You'll notice that rather large number, that's the accruals for our 11th and 10-month employees. So in June, we include those. So you can see at the end right now, unaudited totals of about $81.5 million of payroll, which is a little bit less than what our revised budget said. You can see the variance there. Operating as well, you'll notice that's for contingencies as well. We're still paying bills out of 20, so we've got that included, but you'll notice that our operating costs were less, especially the last couple of months there in April and May. Down to your revenues, the QBE, where we said we would be. Taxes were up, collections, and then other. We've got that as well, so you can see the variance between the totals on your revenue versus what we expected to take in, same way with the expenses above that. So you can see we have a very healthy fund balance. Remember, that includes about $15 million for our down payment for Lowndes High School as well. So it's sitting there as well. So overall, looks good on the monthly summary. And I'll tell you, our closeout for FY20, we get our actual numbers. We still spend on federal grants and other grants all the way through September. So October, we'll give you a final, here's to the penny, how much we had at the end. But at this point, that's where we are.
Gentlemen, just a reminder, and I know you're all well aware, and we've talked about this before, but because of the strong financial position that the district is currently in, is why we have been able to, approaching the 2021 school year, forego any employee furloughs, reduction in staff, all of that. We have made a couple of budget adjustments in terms of reducing some budgets, but not to the point that we think it is going to interrupt services whatsoever to students or staff. So again, as we look at it frequently, I hear from some of you all regularly, we're in a strong financial position. As you'll see with SPLOST collections, we think that's a pretty good indicator. When we look at that report momentarily, that the economy is hopefully on the mends and on the way back.
All right, your next is your general fund revenues and expense report. Take a look at that. I always take a look as we're here at actual in June of 20 and budget up through 20. So if you look at H&I and compare that to, of course, last year, you can see percentage-wise, but it also reads out the totals there at the very end as well. Looking at revenues, we're still good. You take all the revenues, add up with what we had budgeted for. We do have that excess this year in local property tax and other. Going down through your state revenues, we expected that, so we're good. On the next page, your expenses. Take a look at that. Take your actual compared to your budget for about 12 months. You can see the variance and coming in a little bit lower on most of those. So looking good on our total expenditures versus our revenues. So very pleased with that as well. Very pleased with that.
Anybody have any questions?
Next, our athletic report. And as you can tell, several pages, but if you take a look at the revenues, you come down to the very bottom. Actual revenues, they're on line 20, column H. You can see that's where we ended up as of June 30, compared to what our budget was. The increases, you can see that, of course, playoffs, and that had a great deal to do with that. As you go through the rest of the lines of the expenses over the schools and the sports, you get to the very end, on the last page, page 7, you can notice the total athletic expenditures. Take a look, that's the line 250 underneath actual. And you can see that compared to where we are and the difference between. So very good year in athletics as well. Last but not least, your SPLOST report. It has rebounded. As you can see, this month, we're actually up 4% where we were this month last year, in June. You can see that increase, of course, the dip from the month before. So looking good there as well. We're very pleased. Very pleased.
Highest June collection in 8 years. So again, I think that's encouraging, speaks well, hopefully, for the direction our economy is trending at this point. Anybody have questions for me, Joe?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, item number 5 is Title I, Neglected and Delinquent Services. Mr. Hamilton, Federal Program, is making his way. And you have the information in front of you, an executive summary.
Good evening, Mr. Taylor, members of the board. You do have in front of you a packet. Part of our Title I Part A funding that we get from the federal government requires that if you have a neglected or delinquent site in your school district, you have to provide support for them. And we do that in the form of after-school tutoring. For the past 5 to 6 years, we've contracted that out. Before I came in, it was done through retired teachers providing that support. But since I came on board, we have those last 2 retired teachers retired. And so we decided that was a good time to step over and go to a contracted service. What you have in your packet are the 4 bids that we received, or a brief 1 page of those 4 bids. We got bids from coast to coast. We had 2 from Georgia, 1 from Miami, Florida, and a company based out of Los Angeles, California. The hourly rate, as we put in our RFP, they range from $45 an hour to $69 an hour. And what you have in there is a recommendation that we will go with the what happened to be the lower bid of $45 an hour from the local company here in Valdosta, ENA Coaching. They have been providing that service at our 2 sites. That's Raintree Village in the south end of the district, and Georgia Sheriff's Boys Ranch in the north end. And both sites are very pleased with that support that they're getting there. And I think because they are local, they were able to come in on the low end. But we do put language in there that we don't have to take that low bid because we want to make sure we're getting the best support that's available. But as it worked out, they are the low bid. So the recommendation is that you approve ENA Coaching for the FY21 school year.
Anybody have questions?
How long have they, because they're the ones that have been doing it, how long have they been doing that?
They were actually doing, as a company, some volunteer services for our schools prior to getting into tutoring. They have been a company that's kind of evolved. They started out in providing classes with leadership and some basic business skills.
How long have they been doing it for us, though?
They have been doing it for us approximately 5.5 years.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, the next item, the Lowndes County School System reopening plan. As you are aware, as we get into the plan and look at this, difficult, delicate situation that we're in as a community, as a state, as a nation, even in the world. But for our part in that, trying to balance the needs of the students in our community, all of our staff, certainly includes our teachers, as well as our community. We've heard from parents, we've heard from business leaders, Over the last 10 to 12 weeks, we've had multiple meetings developing the plan. We've had representation from parents, teachers, health professionals in our community, business leaders, community stakeholders, as we have put this plan together. And I will tell you that it has evolved greatly. It doesn't look anything like it looked 10 or 12, 13 weeks ago. I will tell you that we state multiple times throughout this plan that it is fluid. We've got to be willing to adapt and change as new information becomes available. But as we go through here, and you'll see the priority, the safety of our students and staff, and again, that translates to the bigger picture, including our community. We reviewed numerous plans from across the state of Georgia, as well as outside of the boundaries of Georgia. Our return to school plan is based on the Georgia Path to Recovery for K-12 schools, which was developed by the Georgia Department of Health, as well as the Georgia Department of Education. We also sought guidance from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as several of the governor's executive orders. Most recently, we monitored his last presser last Friday at 8 o'clock and gleaned from that executive order even still some changes. And I suspect that I know that it will change between now and the start of school as well as we get new information. I said it's got to be flexible. That's our intent. It will be modified as new information becomes available. It's been reviewed as well as approved by our local health department officials, emergency management officials. We've worked diligently to provide two options for a quality education for our students, our staff, our parents, and the community for the 2021 school year. Face-to-face instruction is without a doubt most conducive to learning. We've implemented multiple safety measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. We're also offering a virtual learning option for parents who prefer that choice. We also took into consideration the needs of our community, which again have also been voiced by local stakeholders. We had a parent meeting, we've had community members that participated in development also. We'll continue to work closely with our healthcare professionals and monitor relevant data as we consider modifications on a day-to-day basis to our plan. As situations warrant, we'll communicate changes in a timely fashion. And again, that's delineated in the plan on multiple fronts. Prior to the beginning of the 2021 school year, each Lowndes County School System employee will receive a washable cloth mask and a plastic face shield that extends beyond the chin, as well as on each side covers the face. Each student will also receive a washable cloth face covering. Each teacher will have hand sanitizer, sanitizing wipes, as well as aerosol disinfectants on their desk. We'll also have hand sanitizer available in dispensers that will be mounted throughout the school in various locations. As we get into the plan, and I certainly am not going to read that to you all have seen it, been through it. We've developed another document, frequently asked questions, that is the same content that's in the plan, but if somebody needs to go and try to find something that's of a topical nature, we hope that will expedite that process as well. Our expectation is that after tonight's meeting, we will post the plan, the frequently asked questions, those documents that are the basis for the plan from DOE, from the Department of Public Health. All of that will be available on the website. Again, I would remind you and encourage you to be patient with us. As situations evolve, the plan will evolve with it. But to hit the high points, and Ms. Williams, we got it, we can project it, the plan itself. As she's pulling that up, just the cover sheet talks about the basis. Again, the majority of it is based on the tenets from the Georgia Path to Recovery for K-12 schools, which was developed in collaboration with the Georgia Department of Public Health as well as DOE. We all understand the seriousness of this situation. The last thing we want is for somebody else to get sick and have to deal with this, or even worse. The reality is, in our community and everywhere else, it's happening every day. But we don't want to do anything to contribute to that. So we put in place multiple steps to mitigate and hopefully minimize the risk as we begin to get ready to open school. If you go, Ms. Weldon, to page 4, just beyond the table of contents, we talk about the 2 learning options. The first, traditional face-to-face. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We are prepared to provide a Chromebook for every student in grades 2 through 12 that will be in the Lowndes County school system. Our intent is, as those students that start in person, if worst case scenario, sometime after school starts, if we find ourselves in a situation as we did last spring and the governor shuts down public schools across Georgia, every student 2 through 12 will have a Chromebook and be prepared to take that home. We'll also prepare all of our teachers. The priority will be all of those that will be teaching initially in the virtual option. But within those first couple of weeks of school, our goal is, our plan is to train all of our teachers so that we will better deliver virtual instruction in the event that schools were to be shut down and that would have become the only option for some period of time. The second option you see at the bottom there, virtual learning through Google Meets. We talk about how that will look. Pre-K students will not be eligible for that. If we are closed, we'll provide paper packets for our preschool students across the district. Another thing I need to point out is that we at this time are asking parents, students at the elementary level to commit to whichever option they decide for a 9-week period for grading purposes, and at the middle school and high school level for a semester. And the intent there is to prevent anybody from just going in and out multiple times. But again, I'll be transparent with you. To think that that is cast in stone, we're going to be flexible in that regard. If, for instance, we have a student that is in the face-to-face model and they test positive, they obviously will have to go home for a period of time, and we have a decision-making tree in here, and you'll see that in the appendices. But if after they're quarantined and they're no longer positive and they want to come back to face-to-face instruction, that will certainly be allowed. So again, there's a lot of nuances to this, but just trying to hit the high points and give you an overall understanding of where we are. Page 5 addresses cleaning and hygiene. I told you about the supplies that we'll have on each teacher's desk. Each school will be equipped with refillable sanitizer and each of those things we talked about. A certain number of masks will be warehoused at each school facility. We'll talk about proper hand washing techniques, go over all of that. We'll have signage that will be posted throughout each school as well. The custodial staff will be cleaning and disinfecting on a regular basis to ensure that viral spread via surfaces is kept at a minimum. Cloth covered items, drapes, pillows, and I think about an elementary age, if it's some soft, manipulative, we're going to minimize those. Most of that, as the principals are already aware, as teachers begin to return even before the first day of pre-planning, we'll put that stuff away, again, to try to minimize any spread. Teachers and students will utilize disinfectants and wipes to clean and sanitize desks and tables once per day where the same student sits in the desk. And again, that's a step to minimize that. Again, to contrast an elementary to a middle and high school classroom, and we'll get into transportation in a minute. The same student will sit in the same seat on the bus at elementary school in the same desk for that day. If there's movement from room to room, more so in the middle school and high school, it'll be cleaned after each student is at that desk or that table as we go throughout the day. Do we have enough custodians to do that in every building? Absolutely not. But folks, I'm telling you, in these unique times, it is going to take everybody doing everything we can to make this work. It may be as simple as the aerosol disinfectant. What we're using is safe for students. And the good news is that it kills whatever may be on that surface, hard surface, within 45 seconds. So again, that's something that could be quickly dispersed over a classroom setting. On down at the bottom of page 5, in the event of an exposure, custodial staff will isolate, deep clean, and impacted classroom and/or space. And again, we'll deal with that on a situational level, if that involves one classroom or one area or a wing, and worst case, if it were to be a school. But as we get on into this, you'll see and understand that better. Page 6 speaks to clinics and student health. Not only health department personnel, but our head school nurse, Ms. Margie Davis, has also participated in these meetings and the development of this plan, has had her ear to the ground with the latest information from the health department as well. The first paragraph there below those bullets, all parents, guardians must complete a care doc registration immediately, as this is a requirement for students to be seen in the clinic. Again, the idea there is to expedite and streamline this process. If there's something going on, we are already working very closely and in collaboration with health department officials. We have information that will help speed up the process if we get into a tracing situation, and they're going to come in and utilize their staff to help us make those determinations. And that's what we've been doing all summer as we develop this. Students that are sick at school will be sent to the school nurse clinic. If students have COVID-like symptoms, they'll be provided a mask if they don't already have one on, and isolated from other students that are there for routine reasons, medication, that sort of thing, until a parent can come pick them up. We then speak to that. They must quickly be picked up and promptly leave school, and then we go back to that return to school guidance in the appendix. Students and staff who become ill are required to seek medical treatment and follow that Department of Public Health guidance prior to returning to school. I'll tell you all that we're going to err on the side of caution, that if somebody has symptoms that may be similar to COVID-19, they may not have COVID-19 at all, we're going to err on the side of caution. We have invoked that this summer with staff. If somebody calls and says, I'm not feeling good, stay at home, we're going to err on the side of caution. And we're going to do the same thing with our students and work with parents as we do that. But again, you see they're required to seek medical treatment and then follow those DPH guidelines before they'll return to school or work. The next bullet, when cases of COVID-19 for students or staff are confirmed, again, we work with those local health authorities to determine the appropriate response. We didn't want to wait and try to make those decisions on the run. That's why you'll see all of the detail in here, the decision tree, all of the basis that we've used to develop this. It'll all be pretty clear cut as best it can be, although some circumstances will differ. As recent as this afternoon, another phone conversation with Dr. Grove. They're on board with working with us. I said earlier, the plan has been endorsed, approved by them also, but they'll be working very closely with us as we embark on this situation that none of us have seen the likes of before. Those next 4 open bullets there, we talk about notifying the health department immediately, and again, that's all a part of this protocol. Notifying parents, students of parents, keeping in mind all HIPAA requirements are in play. But we also feel like that we've got a responsibility to make people aware without ever calling anybody's name. We'll certainly make sure that we're adhering to that. Again, the recommendation there would be to stay home, follow that guidance. Again, we said before that those N95 masks, the guidance we have been given is those nurses in the clinics, and we already have them on hand, will be wearing the N95 grade mask, but they did not see the need for anybody else in school to have those on. Page 7 speaks to communication, and you see as we go there that we want to be as thorough and accurate. We're not interested in being first. We want to make sure that what we communicate publicly will be first and foremost accurate, and then again the sensitivity to those affected, be they students or staff. But you see there, we'll again encourage parents to make sure their contact information is up to date. We've tried again in this plan to utilize technology. You can click on that link, make these changes, and you'll see throughout here there are multiple ways to do that, utilizing the technology we have available. The next one, website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the media outlets. We'll push all of that again starting tonight. when we get through with this and make all of this information available, and we'll do that as we get into the school year. I mentioned earlier that signs, we'll have them posted throughout the buildings, every classroom, common areas, cafeterias, to make folks available. I think that everybody has been exposed to that information, but we want to make sure we're doing our part. Coping and resilience. Again, we recognize not only the physical aspect, but the emotional side, the social emotional effect on students, on parents, on families, and we're prepared for that as well. Our social workers, counselors provide services, including access to mental health support. We already know the information we've gotten from the American Pediatrics Association, from the CDC, as well as the Department of Health. There's all kinds of needs that are in existence right now because kids have been out so long and haven't had a lot of the support that many of them need on a daily basis. So we're not going to neglect that as either. The next bullet, social workers coordinate those APEX services, which again, in terms of mental health, we'll have that going for those students that qualify and require or need those services. And then the next three open bullets there, we again cite tremendous resources that we have utilized, but we also hope that people will refer to that we think is a good foundation provided for this plan. Page 8 speaks to extracurricular activities, including athletics. Students enrolled in virtual learning may be able to participate in extracurricular activities at their zone school. And then it talks about that may vary based on the activity. And gentlemen, let me just give you an example of kind of the things we talked through with principals and parents as we looked at that. If there's an activity, why did we say may? If there's an activity that students can participate in and they have chosen the virtual delivery option, if there is no requirement during the student day for them to participate in, to be eligible to participate after school hours, then they could participate in an extracurricular activities after school hours being a virtual student. For instance, and let me just use this as an example. If there is a student that is in the virtual model that is a member of the chess club or wants to participate in the chess club, and there's no requirement during the day to be a member of the chess club that they would have to participate in, that would be something that would be easy for a virtual student to participate in after school hours. If it is a band student, and I'm just using this as an example, and there's a requirement during the day to participate in the marching band, to be in a band class, they would need to be in a face-to-face instruction model to be able to participate in band. And I don't want to exhaust all of those possibilities, but I'm just trying to give you a reference to two examples that we can use as we go through this and make those decisions. The next paragraph speaks to the governance of high school athletic activities by the GHSA. Their Board of Trustees met this afternoon and shared with the board around 4 o'clock some of the decisions they have made. Their medical committee will be meeting on Wednesday, and we may get some additional guidance from them after that time. You see the next group of open bullets there. It speaks to Lowndes High athletes. Mr. Philip Pipolo, who's the athletic trainer, any of those needs that come up, they'll be reported to him. At the middle school level, it would be the middle school athletic director. And for any other extracurricular activities, including elementary, again, a link to an electronic form that ensures compliance with FERPA and HIPAA. Those will be reported to the nurse and the principal, and then we'll meet our obligation to communicate that to the health department. And also, if it's something to do with GHSA, they have asked us to communicate that with them as well. The bottom half of page 8 addresses face coverings. I said to you earlier what we'll be providing for students and staff. And you see here that we are strongly recommending for students and staff at all times. We're encouraging that, but certainly in common areas, hallways, cafeterias, class changes. And then it speaks to the face shield, what we said earlier, making sure it covers the chin. If there's an opportunity, and there are many of them, you will not hear me say that we are going to be able to ensure social distancing on a school bus or in a school in all settings. We use words throughout the plan where feasible, when practicable. That's the stance and that's the position that we've been given. Again, all of the basis for this plan. We're not going to tell you something that we can't do. That's why we strongly encourage the wearing of face coverings throughout. Again, the bottom of that page, 3 more links that give you guidance and basis for that. Page 9 addresses immunizations. All of that is still in effect. The middle of the page is media center procedures. In addition to the groups I mentioned earlier, we have also had meetings with media specialists, with art and music teachers, outside of the traditional classroom settings, and trying to put in place, again, steps to mitigate and minimize spread. So as you can see there, elementary students, carts will be delivered. They will not be allowed to check out books when those are returned. They'll be quarantined for a minimum of 72 hours, and again, that's right by the recommendations that we have, the guidelines that we're adhering to before we put them back in circulation. Monitoring for symptoms, conducting regular screening for symptoms and ongoing self-monitoring throughout the school day can help reduce exposure. We have asked throughout here, students as well as staff and parents with younger students to self-screen before you put a child on the school bus, or they bring them to school, or they drive to school, and before we come to work. Again, we're going to be understanding and lenient with that. If you don't feel good, don't come to work. Don't send your student to work. But we've got to have parents work with us to be able to accomplish that. The top of 10, it continues there. Another change is that we are saying to parents, per the plan, per the guidance, is that in the past, we have asked parents not to send the students back to school unless they were 24 hours, free of fever for 24 hours without any temperature suppressant. We're now saying 72 hours. Again, that's the guidance the health professionals are telling us that we need to utilize. So for 72 hours, they don't need to come back to school. And again, in the absence of a fever-reducing medication. New student registration. Again, trying to minimize exposure there. Links, an opportunity to do that electronically as well. Open house. In the appendices, you're going to see the elementary, middle, and high school plans. We've tried to break those groups up into smaller groups and utilize that as well. Physical distancing, minimizing exposure, I think we've covered that probably more than once. Several bullets on page 11. We speak to various steps that can help us do that. Every one of our buildings is a little bit different. There are some things that we can do consistently from school to school. There are other things that, measures that will be invoked depending on the uniqueness of the building and the layout. But you can go through there and see various things that we'll utilize, entry and exit points, trying to, again, minimize bumping into one another, maintain as much social distancing as we can. We're going to minimize outside visitors. We're going to keep that to the foyer, and we have controlled access in each of our schools. We won't be having visitors in the classroom or in the cafeterias until further notice. We just think, again, that's important. As much as we can control the group in a classroom, on a wing, in a school, we think that is going to help us be able to do this. Our own itinerants that travel from school to school will adhere to the same measures that we're expecting of everybody else as they go from screening guidelines from one school to the next. I mentioned no volunteers, those class changes and other transition routines. Each principal is already working on that, and we'll try to minimize that in each of our schools. It will vary from one school to the next based on the grade level and the age of children and those schedules. Other things we've talked about, maximizing the space in each classroom. I'm not telling you that in every classroom we can guarantee you 6 feet apart in every direction, but we're going to maximize that in every classroom. Same way in the cafeterias. We'll utilize staggered schedules, every other seat, students facing all in the same direction. All of these are just opportunities to help us incorporate that. But again, they'll all be somewhat different. They won't look exactly the same from one school or even one classroom to the next. Recess, we have not eliminated recess. We think that's important for students at the elementary level, but we are going to do things again in terms of staggering schedules and separation, even when they're outside. They know that it's good for them to be outside. We've tried to make sure we didn't overlook any aspect of it as we approach the beginning of the school year. No field trips until further notice. We have encouraged principals to utilize virtual field trips to the greatest extent possible. And I would like to think that at some point in this school year, we'll be able to lift that as these numbers taper off and wane, and we feel better about that. The same thing goes for school assemblies. We're just going to minimize large gatherings of staff and or students as we go. We've encouraged principals as they can facilitate parent meetings, whether that's of any nature. Conferences, IEP meetings, utilize our virtual tools when possible. And if it's absolutely impossible, then certainly we'll structure the setting to accommodate and work with parents that they cannot do that. Top of 12 speaks to our vulnerable populations, not only staff, but also we have students, as all of you are aware, with varying underlying health conditions and situations. We have been sensitive to that and also have addressed that in here as well. We don't want to do anything to contribute to the risk that any of our folks may be, the situation they may be in. School calendar at this time, we don't have anything to modify the calendar, but I'm telling you again, that is apt to change between now and next week. We monitor the numbers. We look at the 7 and 14-day numbers every day. I get 2 reports daily from the health department. We're looking at those, scrutinizing those daily. Not just cumulative numbers, but where are we today? The hospital numbers, the test positivity rate. We are data rich when it comes to COVID, and I know all of you are aware of that. We just try to focus on the relevant data as it pertains to our students and our staff. The bottom of the page there speaks to nutrition and serving meals. Again, we list a number of practices that may be invoked. Not all of them will be in play in every school, but there's again a list here of how we're going to deal with that. Students won't be able to touch items. Everything will be served by a lunchroom employee. Some will eat their meals in their rooms. Some classes won't go to the lunchroom, but that will vary again from school to school as principals and staff make those determinations and what they can do to accomplish that in each of their individual schools. School attendance, I will tell you the rationale behind us suspending attendance incentives. We all know there are some parents who may send a child to school when they're not well, under normal circumstances, because they don't want to lose the opportunity to participate in those incentive programs. We certainly do not want to contribute to that with a student and or a parent wanting to be there and not lose that opportunity. So we've suspended all of that until further notice. We just think we can remove that temptation. If there is an illness and there are attendance issues, certainly we're going to communicate with and work with parents to help resolve that. Transportation is addressed at the bottom of page 13. Challenging on a school bus, next to impossible unless we were to run our current routes about 4 times in the morning and 4 times in the afternoon. Again, it's just not practical to do that. It's not feasible. And we can't social distance on a school bus and get them to school and get them home. So again, we're just trying to be up front and speak to that. We have also said to parents throughout this document, we encourage those that can to transport their students. Get them to school and let's minimize the number of students that we need to transport on a school bus. Drop them off, those that can drive or ride with a family member. We encourage parents at this time to do that. You see again there, we'll require, I mentioned earlier, the same students will be sitting in the same seats on the bus to try to minimize that. They'll be disinfected on a day-to-day basis between routes. If it is determined that a COVID case, somebody tests positive on a bus, we'll take that bus out of service until we can deeply sanitize and clean it. We have the foggers, we've utilized those back in March and April in classrooms, on buses, and we will be utilizing that tool again. We talked about invoking things such as opening the hatch on the roof, weather permitting, to help enhance flow. All of our buses that are on regular routes are air conditioned. So again, just all of the little things that we can do to try to minimize this as we go. If somebody's sick at school, they're not going to be able to ride the bus home. You know, again, we're back to why is it important we have current, up-to-date contact information? Because somebody's got to come get them. We don't want to put them on a bus with other students if we're aware of that. Water and ventilation systems, that was a part of the governor's executive order. All of that has already been done throughout the summer. All of that is up to industry standards. We are currently in the process of, right now, if we started school tomorrow, water fountains are unplugged. But we're retrofitting those water fountains with gooseneck dispensers. We're encouraging students and staff to bring your own water bottle, refillable water bottle, and we'll retrofit those water fountains where you can do that, and certainly nobody's mouth will be around that to, again, minimize that. Prime time, we've had several folks ask about prime time. All of their protocols, they're a certified provider. All of their protocols are in place as well. And so for those all of our elementary schools that we will start prime time soon after we start school, and it'll be available until 6:30 on each of those campuses. And you can see there all of the checks, everything that they will participate in and ensure for prime time after we've dismissed school. Page 15 is the beginning of the appendix. There's the open house schedule for elementary. You see we've broken them down, tried to create smaller groups by last name. As you go through that, you can see another time where we encourage wearing of masks. The next page, the next couple of pages, is the middle school schedule for all 3 middle schools. You'll see some virtual options on there, but you'll also see again where we have divided the student body by last name and asked to minimize the number of adults that come with them for open houses. Page 18 speaks to the Lowndes High open house. Again, divided over a couple of day period by last name, student alphabet. Page 19, and I hope that all of you have seen this by now. If you haven't, we've put another copy of that flow chart, that decision-making tree in there on page 20. Another tremendous resource. None of this has been developed in isolation. I said before, multiple stakeholders that have had a part. This plan has evolved, and I feel good about it. It's been endorsed. I said to you before about healthcare professionals. I think it's very thorough, but it will change. It will be modified as we go. And then page 21 is a self-screening document. We have added to this. It has also evolved from about 6 questions to what you see today. We have asked these questions as students and staff have come back to various activities over the summer. And we would ask parents to help us with these situations each and every day. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, I would add, and I know that you all have questions and comments, and we'll hope to have some helpful discussion as we go. But I would like to remind everybody, and certainly the board is aware of this, but on the consent agenda, the item number 6 that says the school system reopening plan. If tonight you choose to approve this plan, it is actually an endorsement of the plan. And the reason I wanted to clarify that is, it is not a policy, it is an administrative tool, and it's going to change. So the practicality, again, of the changes, we don't need to have a called board meeting every time we need to alter this plan. We will certainly send you the highlighted changes and the rationale behind the changes whenever we need to modify. But I did want to clarify that it's not a policy. It is an administrative tool, and by voting If you choose to do so, on that item on the consent agenda, it would be to endorse the plan as it is written today. You see the draft and the watermark behind it. Again, it is subject to change tomorrow. Questions, gentlemen? Did I mention before, I don't remember, I did not, I've said this so many different times, so many different groups. We also have a couple of other documents that I mentioned, frequently asked questions, that we'll also post along with this, on the website as soon as it's okay. We'll make sure that it is speak to that. Questions or comments?
I have one, I'll start. I would like first to make face masks mandatory. And here's my reasoning for that. There's three things that have been talked about by all the medical professionals: social distancing, washing your hands, and wearing a mask to help protect you from getting or spreading this virus. You can look around at different research. There's a lot of different opinions. But there's one thing for sure, it's a protection in some form. Do we make it mandatory for all of our staff? Do we make it mandatory for all of our students? We have students to consider, hard of hearing, deaf students, that need to read lips. It's probably difficult for everybody in this room to hear me talking right now. I get it. But I think it's very important. I think it's something we need to consider. I know the governor is against it. That's okay. We've been selected to protect our community. And it was my thought. Something I think we ought to consider.
What's the difference between making that in all situations, or is that in congested areas, or, where we're moving down hallways, or is that after they get in a class and they're in their seats? Or you just saying 99% of the time, all the time?
I think that 99% of the time, 100% of the time would be fabulous. But I also understand sometimes that's not feasible. I think in the hallways it's very important. If you go out and look at age statistics, right now they say the highest place where this thing is increasing is between the ages of 16 and 28. I was very concerned about elementary school. I still am. I'm not saying I'm not, but it depends on what statistics you look at. I think it's very, very important. I know strongly recommended is what is in all the paperwork. I would like for it to be required.
What's the difference between strongly recommended and required?
Can't go to school without your mask, or you can.
So can you enforce that? I mean, from a legality standpoint, the governor has not made a law saying you have to wear a mask. The CDC recommends, strongly recommended, for providing masks to all the students, providing all the staff. I just don't feel like we're in a position to actually enforce that. At the end of the day, we're all in here, everybody's got a mask on, so I think saying strongly encourage, we want everyone to be safe, right? But I think saying required assumes there's repercussions if you don't do it. So if a kid shows up on the school bus and he doesn't have a mask, we can tell him, hey, you can't get on this bus? No, because legally we can't. Well, hey, we can't enforce that because his parents can say, wait a minute, there's no law stating saying my son has to wear a mask, right? What do you think?
From the legal standpoint, yes, you can require it. And what you do is you would amend the dress code. I mean, you can't get on the bus with short shorts or overalls without a shirt on. The school board sets requirements for students to wear to be able to come to school. And yes, under that scenario, if a kid shows up at the bus stop without a bus, they do just like they did if a kid came to the bus stop and was throwing up. Whatever that protocol is in transportation or whatever the other parts of the day, and then it gets down to the parent's determination of how to effectuate compliance. There is an executive order. The executive order, I do not personally believe affects what goes on in a school if a dress code is amended to include a face mask. I don't know that the governor has the right to say you can wear overalls or you can't wear overalls, or you can wear a face mask or not a face mask. The lawsuit that is currently going on now is against the mayor of Atlanta and the city council of Atlanta under the auspices of requiring masks to be worn anywhere within the city limits of Atlanta. Athens has the same basic statute as does Savannah. There is no litigation as of 5 o'clock today. I don't know what's been filed since then against Athens or Savannah. So this is kind of a Mayor Bottom's governor kind of, situation at this point. Not insinuating there's not legal merit to both sides, but it's not across the board contesting a mandatory mask requirement. Certainly not under a dress code situation.
I know like at the hospital, at the hospital, like mask.
And the same thing with Walmart, CVS, I mean, there's,
You don't wear one, you don't come in, period. It's just the way it is. So I think you do have the right to say that.
Is there any difference with us being a public entity versus a private entity?
Hospital is public use.
well, I mean, certainly there's differences for us being a public entity. I don't think that obstructs the ability, if the board deems it appropriate and the superintendent modifies the plans based on the recommendation, if made, to require that. Again, the governor could file a suit against the Lowndes County School Board for requiring masks to be worn, and we would have to go before a judge and have the judge opine as to what we will or will not do. But I think the school system is different. You, board members, are in a different situation than the city council saying, you gotta wear one at Walmart. Walmart can say it. But whether you're interfering with business practices, and we're not, these are our employees, these are our students, and if it is for health purposes, we can require teachers not come to school intoxicated. And we can take actions to preserve the integrity and the educational prowess that we provide for students and employees. The only thing I would say is if you're gonna do it for students and employees, it's employees, not just teachers. I mean, you need to have the administrators, custodial staff, cafeteria people, bus drivers, and those types of things all involved. There are 14,000 or close to 15,000 students and 1,500 employees roughly in those numbers. You're not gonna have 100% compliance. If you have 95% compliance, you're making it a little bit safer for 15,000, 14,000 people a day.
Yes. Yep. And let me say to y'all, I think I've said this each one of you individually over the past couple of weeks, but just to go back and tell you, give you an example of how this plan has evolved. Some 3 weeks or so ago, we had under the transportation section, bus drivers were required to wear masks and students were required on the bus to wear masks. And we try to be, again, realistic in what can we enforce? What can we require? I don't think we can say one group or the other without saying both, and I mean students and staff, all adults. We just can't do that. I think it has to be 100% across the board, either way. But the reality of the situation is, and this is just one example, again, multiple meetings and hours of conversation about this. I could give you a number of examples. A bus, there's a 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old at the bus stop, doesn't have on a mask. What we do, we've talked about, we can put masks on every bus, give them to them. We try to call a parent, nobody's home, can't leave them on the side of the road. I mean, there's just a multitude of scenarios that we came up with. The same thing, and I'll give you one adult example. And I'll just use myself, and again, I wear a mask, I'm taking it off to talk. But as I go in schools, I'll have a mask on. But if employee X, John Doe or Jane Doe, and I'm not gonna pick on Jeff, but I will, if Mr. Jeff Hill, I'm not wearing a mask and you can't make me. You know, again, from a legal standpoint, Mr. Turner and I have had this conversation. But the reality is, I've heard from staff beyond teachers, teachers included, parents, community members, on both ends of the spectrum. Everybody ought to be mandated to wear a mask. And I've heard it from the other end, my child will not be wearing a mask. Everything from, again, these are realistic examples. They have a health condition that only makes it worse. To just, my child's not gonna wear a mask. To, I've talked to enough that have said, I couldn't make them wear a mask at home and keep their hands off of it, or swapping. I mean, there's just a multitude. I just want you to know this wasn't just some arbitrary decision we came up with overnight. It has gone back and forth. But I do not think we can mandate, if that's what you choose to do, or we choose to do, one group without the other. I think it's all or none. Because I don't think we can say, by doing that, if we were distinguished between the two or differentiate between the two, students are more important than staff, or staff are more important than people. They're all important. And that is the dilemma that we continually grapple with in trying to get our hands around this pandemic as we go forward.
Well, I think it's gotta be all or nothing, just like you just said. But I find it very interesting that wearing a mask during a global pandemic is a point for argument. I don't get it. I don't. And I might be right by myself, but I just find that hard to believe.
Let me say this, and somebody used this example maybe a few weeks. Given everything that's out there, and again, I think, you know, everybody's exposed to it and everybody knows what a benefit this is. But I had somebody share this example with me. We know all of the, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, and I'm probably fixing to, Mr. Attorney may have to get me out of this, all of the ill effects of smoking. But yet we have intelligent, mature adults that choose, and my only point being that's a point of personal preference. And I think with adults in particular, that is a point of personal preference. You don't have to convince me I need it, I know I do. But at the same time, I've heard from X number of staff members that that's a point of personal preference.
But they're not allowed to smoke in our schools.
Right, that's
No,
what
my point being is the personal preference idea. I'm just trying to use that example. So
But here's my personal
having the
preference.
knowledge of the benefits of it was my point.
Right, but my personal preference is in my everyday job, I'm required to wear a mask. If I choose not to wear one, I don't work there. I'm not saying that's where we go with this. It's another example, just like you just gave. You know, I think that's what we're here for. That's what we were elected for.
Here's another thing about that too, though, and I kind of go along with Lonnie's idea, because we meet once a month, we meet sooner than that, this is an ongoing thing, and like I think there's 3 companies now that are in stage 3, or one I know is in stage 3, another close to stage 3, testing and vaccinations, so we may be within a very few weeks of having the vaccinations available, and, you know, this may thing how to take itself. But what I'm saying is, I'll certainly rather err on the side of overly cautious than under cautious. And, I mean, I can kind of go along with the fact that let's just try to get everybody to, you know, let everybody wear one. And so, and ask parents to furnish them with the financially can and will and all that. And if they can't, then we'll supply them. And let's do it, and we can, and like you said, the document's no ongoing thing, that decision's no ongoing thing. We make them change in the first month and rescind it, and not have to do it anymore. And hopefully that's what will happen. But I'd certainly rather do that than all of a sudden go down the road and at some point say, gosh, I wish we'd done that, we might have stopped this or whatever, you know. I mean, I think it's something, and the other side of that is the personal choice fact. We're offering a personal choice. We talk about teachers that don't want to, but the students, if the parent doesn't want them to, they can go on the virtual school system, school route until, you know, the opportunity changes itself. So they have options. It's not like you can't go to school, you're not going to get schooling or anything else. That's not the case. You have your options. But, you know, I think in this whole thing, the mask is not really for yourself as much as it is for everybody else. And I think if somebody refuses to wear a mask, especially children in a public situation like that, that's pretty, I don't mind who likes or don't like it, that's pretty poor. You're not thinking about your fellow children in the classroom and your fellow neighbors and family and all that's there too when you refuse to do that. And I kind of like that idea of what Ronnie's talking about. I think we need to consider it.
Well, this is gonna sound really strange coming from me, because I don't like being told what to do. But now we know we do have a vehicle. I mean, we can make it part of the dress code. We can make it mandatory. We don't let them come to school without a shirt. We don't let them come to school without shoes. I think we have two responsibilities during this pandemic thing that we're faced with. One is to protect the kids that come to the school and to protect the staff, and the other is to inspire confidence in our community that we're on top of it and we're taking care of it and we're taking all the precautions to protect the students and the staff. There's a lot of parents that feel more comfortable sending their kids to school, and a lot of teachers that feel more comfortable coming back to school if we made it part of the dress code. That's a strange position for me, because again, I don't like being told what to do. But, you know, it's pretty much common sense at this point.
Well, if it's common sense, why hasn't the CDC made it a recommendation at the state level?
You have to ask somebody at CDC, I don't know.
I mean, honestly, I agree with everyone's opinion, but I'm like you, I don't like being told what to do, and I took an oath of office to abide by the laws of the U.S. Constitution and the Georgia Constitution. As of right now, it's not a law, so I'm not gonna stand here and make a recommendation for something that's not the law.
Right, but you are also elected to represent the people in your community, and the people in my community and my district want face masks.
I think we have to definitely look out for the safety of students and staff, first and foremost. I mean, whether it's a law or not. I mean, it sounds like legally we can do that if we want to, unless something else has changed. And I like the idea that, you know, we can always change in 30 days, 90 days, you know, whatever, if it gets better. But we all know as soon as everybody starts coming back together, there's a good chance of a rise. And I mean, I think we've got to do whatever we can to keep everybody safe. Nobody likes wearing them, and I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing from a couple of the principals here, it's, you know, from high school to elementary, it's gonna be difficult. I mean, to keep a.
We're up for it. I'd rather feel like our staff and our students are safe, and we'll handle those little outliers with the mask. I think that will go a long way in making everyone feel safe.
I mean, do you think we can keep them, that they'll wear them with it, I mean, for the most part?
Well, I'm sure there's gonna be some challenges with the very young ones, but for the most part, yes.
Well, if just the majority of them do, then that cuts down on, potential spread. My concern, I'd like to hear from Mr. McCall, if you would mind. Mr. McCall, my concern is, obviously, the most densely populated school is Lyons High School.
Right.
And we have, lunch periods, kids moving back and forth, a lot of crowds in the lunchroom. Do you have a specific plan to address what we do during the lunch period or with the construction? My concern is all the class change, back and forth, they can't take the outside route because of the construction, the hallways are congested. Can you tell us kind of how we going handle that at high school?
Well, some of that's going to depend on how many of our students actually return, so versus how many go virtual. So that will drive some of that. But even if half of our students come back, we'll still have 1,500 students on campus. So we will try to have some directional signage, some understood directions that students will flow between classes. But they're also young adults, and they're going to want to be around one another.
Sure.
So we will do our part to try to keep them socially distanced. you know, whether or not you all decide to have them wear masks or not, we'll do our best to enforce that. Will it be a challenge? Absolutely. We've had a dress code in place for a long time about earbuds and keeping your pants pulled up and other, you know, dress code items, and we work hard to try to enforce that. And if we add masks to that, we'll certainly deal with that. If we choose to make it a requirement, we will then have to deal with it as a discipline concern.
What's your personal opinion, though, if you got 1,500 or 3,000, depending on if they all come back, kids changing class, you know they're thick, I've been there during class
Sure.
change, and they're
Sure.
thick. Do you personally
Sure.
feel like it was, I mean, would you feel safer if you had 15 or 3,000 kids changing classes wearing face masks versus just, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think without a
Would
doubt,
you be in favor
I
of
think
it?
all of us would feel safer. The enforcement side will present some challenges, but we'll have to work through that.
I think that's the biggest thing.
I will say that, I just want to make a note that, you know, if we're talking about faculty and staff, when all of us have spoken, everybody pulls their masks down so people can hear them.
Yeah.
So we need to think about a teacher up in front of her students or his students and making some allowances for that. I don't know that a teacher can teach for 90 minutes a day times, you know, 3 or 4 blocks behind a mask, but recognizing that if the teacher is, you know, socially distanced from her students, you know, letting some teachers make some accommodations in that regard for teachers to be able to teach effectively.
Agreed.
And also, and Ronnie mentioned it, and so did Mr. Taylor, every staff member, every employee will have a shield, a clear shield, which certainly, you know, the CDC says that on their guidelines that the mask protects others and the shield protects you, and so a double whammy of it protects, you know, even more so. So I think in whatever administrative plan that is established, there needs to be some, you know, school and facility direction as it relates to those accommodations that are made for a face shield versus a mask, if y'all decide to make it mandatory.
I think that was, you just said exactly what I was fixing to say, was that's why we have the face shield. You know, and still, the face shield still is going to cover everything. It might make it a little bit more difficult to hear. I get it. The safety factor of it, in my mind, and I'm one person, in my mind, is well worth what we're attempting to do.
Well, I think it's gonna be around, but I think wearing a face shield or a mask is gonna make it go away, no. But I'll yield to the, you know, the principals, the building principals, and what they, you know, what they wanna do. If they feel safer, if their staff feels safer, if they're, you know, if they think it'll cut down on spread, then, I mean, I support that. That's who we're here to support anyway.
I think we'd be safer the more that we wear a mask when at all possible. I mean, I know there's, you know, we don't take them off to eat or lunch, and you know, we can make accommodations for teachers too, you know, while they're instructing in the front of the class. Now, if you go lean over somebody's desk to help them, you know, put it on. But, you know, nobody likes these all day, but, you know, you have to breathe too. But, you know, I can see that, at least for now, we may need to.
What's Rodney gonna do at 6:30 in the morning?
He's gonna have a box of
We'll
masks
have
on
to
their
have-
bus, and he's gonna give them to them as they get on if they need one. I mean, we have them. We might as well use them.
And hopefully most of them will bring the mask that was given to them.
Gentlemen, what I'll say is, in talking with bus drivers, I've had multiple bus drivers come to see me today. And it's gonna be, I don't know how we will enforce it on the school bus, with especially some small kids. They gonna take them off. I got one driver on there, their back's to them. But how you gonna enforce it, I don't know, but I will tell you this, that most of my drivers are going to feel better if it is mandated that the child wear that mask on that bus. That's what I've had several tell me today. I had one woman in my office today, she said, I am scared to death. She said, I'm going to go to the doctor, get me some medicine, shake it all over. and so, I mean, you know, it's difficult all the way around. It's a hard situation, you know, and and I think about it, when I think about it, I mean, you know, children, when you look at the thing, children are less affected by it than adults. And bus drivers especially are aged people. Our bus driver fleet, when you look at it, 60 plus, probably 75, 80% of our drivers are 60 plus. And they're at the age group that it affects worse if they get it. So, you know, I want to protect them. We'll do whatever we got to do to get it done. You know, and we'll do the best we can with it. So, you know, either way, I mean, I'm good with it.
Since we're talking about buses, can I ask one thing that just brought to me, and I said I'd bring it up, okay? Hey, hire a person. That there's some, and I'm sure it goes the other direction too, but there's some concern about those buses being so crowded, you know, when you haul them from the middle schools to the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And they were wondering if there was any way that we could somehow have 2 runs or some more buses to kind of thin them out because they are so thick on those runs.
Well, I don't know that we can make 2 runs because we can't get them there on time. Or we won't be able to get them on time. But my thing is, we're not sure at this point how many kids are going to ride the bus. I feel sure that our bus loads are going to be considerably less than what they were last year. I mean, I don't know, if you only have 1,500 or just 3,000 come to the high school, then it's going to be a small crowd on the bus going to the high school as well.
One of those kind of things, you kind of wait and see.
I mean, you know, and I, you know, I don't know that that's going to happen, but you know, and I'm hoping that we can get some information back before the start of school on people telling us how many kids are going to ride the bus. You know, all the kids that are virtual, the principals send all that information to me. The ones that are virtual, I can take them completely out of the route set, and I can get my numbers to where I can look at my numbers better on what's on each bus. I'm hoping I can do that because, to be honest with you, right now I'm short 4 drivers for opening day of school that I don't have drivers to put on bus.
You better start early.
Yeah. Can't start much earlier. But I'm there. I'm leaving the house at 5 o'clock every morning, so it ain't much early. But anyhow, you know, I'm hoping that, and I don't know how it's going to work out, but we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to do the best we possibly can to shift numbers around on buses to try to even the thing out. But number one, we don't have enough drivers. Number 2, we don't have enough buses to add a bunch more buses. So if we add buses, we're going to have to add drivers that we don't have. So, I mean, you know, I'm hoping that some of the numbers is going to be down to where I can combine a couple of routes and you know, get rid of the driver and use one that we've already got. Because the problem we've been faced with COVID is the fact that they shut us down from testing, from training. We couldn't train people. We got some people that want to be drivers that's in training now, but we've just got started back up. So it takes time to get them trained and get them ready and get them tested to where we can do it. You know, we're gonna do something. I don't know what we're gonna do. You may get a phone call one morning, bus 14102 that goes to Hayhire Middle and Lowndes High School. We don't have a driver for it today, so you're gonna have to carry your child to school. So I mean, you know, I don't know anything else to do. When I got all my office staff and everybody I can bag, borrow, and steal on a bus, and don't have anybody else, then we're gonna get in that situation. Ken and I are working on some stuff though, hopefully. But anyhow, we'll do whatever we gotta do, Mr. Thomas.
Gentlemen, I mentioned to you that a lot of people have participated in and involved in the development of this plan. You all are aware, a couple of years ago, Mr. Steve Coleman took on some additional responsibilities as our safety coordinator and has been an integral part of this as well. And Mr. Coleman, were you about to?
Yeah, but just to augment what Mr. Turner said a while ago about the legality of this, In the last executive order issued by the governor on the 15th of this month, it states, and I'm quoting, "is appropriate and practicable at the discretion of the local school board or applicable board of directors, requiring workers and students to take mitigating steps to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which may include requiring workers and students to wear face masks or face coverings while indoors on school property during school hours." So this is directly in alignment with what the governor said we can do.
As Mr. Turner will tell you, I often argue with him, but I concede that he's the only one of the two of us that has a law degree. My interpretation of that, and Mr. Coleman and I have talked about it, so Mr. Turner, I would defer to you if I clarify this. What I believe when we read that last Wednesday, Thursday, when it came out, is that that allows a local board of education to mandate it if you so choose. Is that fair enough?
Absolutely.
That it doesn't prohibit us, but it does allow you to do that if you so choose. Let me go back to one example, and I think that this may be a better example than the smoking example. Again, just trying to be practical, and I should have thought this through before I use that example. I'm going to hear about that. But because I've been around here a long time, cell phones, and I'm looking at Mr. McCall, and there may be others who were at the high school, not in the length of time, but at the high school when this came about. When cell phones began to become prevalent in the hands of high school students and in middle school and even elementary students. Gentlemen, I'm just telling y'all from a day-to-day basis, I can remember when we had in the SRO's office 2 file cabinets that you couldn't put another cell phone in them. And our stance at that time was we didn't want to see them. You know, it wasn't a smartphone then, it was a cell phone. Distracting during class. I mean, it was a day-to-day constant, all you could do about it. I believe that we have evolved, as the technology has evolved, that our view of cell phones, smartphones, is that they can become and be utilized as an instructional tool, basically access to the world in the palm of your hand. However, they can also continue to be a tremendous distraction if not utilized at the teacher's direction in a typical classroom. So it kind of evolved from don't bring them to school, we don't want to see them, don't have them, to, okay, you can have them out during non-instructional times, or you can have them out between classes, at lunch, that kind of thing. So that's all I'm saying is I have said to the principals, and we made some changes after the last meeting with them in the plan, that I just want to make sure that we put all of them and classroom teachers in a situation that whatever we put on paper and we tell our students, our staff, our parents, our public that we're going to require, that we're going to mandate, that we can in fact do that. Because I'm sure that none of you would get the call. I say that in jest. I suspect I might, but you will too. You know, Mr. Smith, I'm sending my child to school every day wearing that mask, but Mr. Browning, Mr. Weeks sit side by side, and they not wearing them. And you know, that teacher and that principal and that superintendent up there don't make them wear it. I'm just trying to, again, get you to think through what is realistic and what's not. There is no arguing the health benefit of it, and there's no arguing our responsibility. I just, again, want to make sure that whatever we do, we are realistic about it. I think we all agree wholeheartedly that it is apt to change, and it will change as this thing begins to evolve, and may change between now and the start of school. But again, as I was recalling some of those conversations that we had with principals, I just want to put them as well as every classroom teacher in a position to be successful.
I think within 2 weeks, if we do say, within 2 weeks, make it part of the dress code, we'll become part of the work. I mean, it may be a struggle. What do y'all think? Do you think it'll be a struggle for the whole time, or do you think after a week or two, then it'll just be the new norm?
I think they've already said, so I mean, I think the big issue is the practicality of enforcing. So obviously, I'm not saying nobody wear masks. I mean, I think you're gonna find 99% of our faculty and staff are gonna be wearing masks. It's the fact that there's no real repercussions, and Roger just said it flat out. Hey, I'm going to tell you right now, that we're not going to be able to enforce it. They're going to be sitting on the bus, these kids are going to be taking it off. We're talking K through 5, kindergarten, first, second graders. They're going to be playing with it. There's nothing I can really do to keep learning and keep driving that bus. There's one bus driver, so there's no real practicality of enforcement So why are we pushing something that you can't really enforce other than saying, hey, we strongly encourage it, we're providing 100% one-to-one ratio for all faculty, all staff, all students. And again, they're cloth masks, which, again, you can look at all the research, but there's not a lot of research saying the cloth mask is doing that much to minimize the spread of, they say, well, if you combine it with social distancing, washing your hands, but just a cloth mask by itself. And so that's what I'm saying. So please don't everyone here take it that, hey, Eric is the only one out there saying he don't want no one to wear masks. I want you to have the option. If you want to wear the mask, wear the mask. It's strongly recommended. We're even providing it for you. We've got this 20-page plan that everyone in this room probably had a decision on. We had the CDC guidelines that we looked at. You had, community support. You had child surveys. You had parent surveys. You had faculty surveys. And this is the plan we came up with. And the plan as it states right now is we highly recommend it, and just stopping short of requiring it because of what Ms. McCall said, hey, well, we're going to be taking off when we're talking because they're not going to hear us, so all right, that's off right there, you're not really doing it. Roger's on the bus saying, well, hey, these kids are going to be doing it, I'm going to tell you that right now, we're not going to be able to enforce it. So I guess that's my point, is why are we even requiring something that you can't enforce when we're saying highly recommend is basically what we can do and still, again, like Wes's point, well, they're gonna get phone calls. Hey, well, why is so-and-so not wearing? He's not wearing. Well, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to teach these kids. We're trying to social distance, and so it's a disruption in the classroom. But at the end of the day, everybody's gonna wanna wear the mask that can, and if they don't, then again, we go back to the virtual option. Well, you have the option as a teacher, you can be a virtual teacher, or as a student, you can take the virtual option. So I just wanna make that clear that that's what the point I'm arguing, not don't wear a mask at all, just, hey, you got the option. Because the practicality of enforcing it is pretty small.
I just think it's more likely to wear it if more the dress code than they are, it's just a suggestion. If we're really trying to stop the spread and slow it down, it's what the teachers want, it's what the principals want. I think it's what.
Well, the teachers did put together this plan, and this is what they came up with. Is that right, Wes? You spoke with the teachers and the principals and surveyed the staff.
We had
Came up with this plan.
We had multiple meetings with representatives, teacher representatives, principals, district level administrators, system level administrators, Department of Public Health. I mean, we had I didn't count on Mr. Drain, I would think it's safe to say some close to 20 probably meetings throughout the summer of the last 10, 12 weeks. We had representation from across the community. I feel good about saying it that way, yes.
So you had multiple input from multiple organizations, including, our school system, to come up with this plan to highly recommend the mask as, indoors, outdoors, just stop short of making mandatory.
Or was that because that is what the governor has put forth? What is in the plan?
It was a combination of that. I said to you all a while ago that just a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had required for bus drivers and everybody on the bus, and just over a multitude of conversations, discussions, certainly taking into consideration the governor's executive order, all of the above. It wasn't any one thing that was kind of a linchpin that turned it. Conversations with multiple other school districts and reviewing plans from a lot of different school systems. All of that was in the mix. But as I said to y'all when we started this meeting, it's in flux. We will enforce and make it work to the best of all of our employees' ability, regardless of what it says. So that's what, I just think we got to be clear. I will say again, that I just don't think we could make a distinction between the adults in the building and the students. I think if we're going to strongly recommend it for one group, it has to be for both. If we're going to require it, it needs to be for both.
I agree 100% with that. I think it's just that we will need to have some consideration for teachers teaching in the front of the room. And obviously they're going to take them off at lunchroom or in the classroom or wherever. But I think like Brian said, more are going to wear it if it's enforced. If not enforced, if it's mandatory. We're going to have to figure out some way if we do that there's some repercussion or whatever. But hopefully you know, everybody will get on board and do what's right. I mean, you know, this is just, as you said, it's ever changing. It's uncharted territory. We've never been in this, but I think we need to err on the safest side that we can. In 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, we can do away with masks. I hope we can. I mean, I hope everything's gone, but, you know, we can take them off in 2 weeks, if a month, if the numbers are going the other way, but when we all show up, we know that there's likely that the numbers are gonna spike. And, I think we've gotta do everything we can to keep everybody safe. I mean, that's just.
I'd rather look back on this and say we did the best we could do and everything we could do
Right.
on the time being.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just ask for a point of clarification from all of you, not asking, again, for a vote at all on this plan, but asking maybe for some acknowledgement, a nod of the head. If I'm understanding and following the direction that it appears to me, the wishes of the board, is it fair to say, I represent this accurately, that the desire of the board is for us to alter the return to school plan to include masks, and we use that, I'm trying to say face coverings, required for all students and staff? Is that a fair representation? I'm asking.
Especially when you're indoors.
It is, I mean,
Yes.
I'm asking. I'm just trying to move us along. We can
I'm
talk
not,
about it.
we'd like to vote on it. I'm not in favor of that, but, you know, I'm in my old years.
Well, everybody has, I mean,
I'm a common opinion as everybody else, so.
I would like to see it on the buses, in the congested area, the halls as they're moving about, and be able to take them off in the classroom with social distance inside the classroom. If we can't do that in the classroom, then they would have to wear masks.
unless we have a large number, a much greater number than we anticipate, that select the virtual option, again, I'm just, y'all know I'm gonna be forthright. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you we're gonna be able to social distance in every classroom. I will tell you in some classrooms, particularly some that's not a normal classroom, a large art room or a large chorus room, a band room, the potential to do it is much greater there, again, depending on the number of students, than in a traditional elementary or high school classroom. We've already talked about it, principals are working on it, to maximize the distance between desks, everybody facing the same direction, all of those steps. But I will not tell you or anybody else that we're going to be able to guarantee we can social distance in classrooms or in every classroom. I think, as you all have mentioned, class change, those transition periods obviously presents a challenge in and of itself. So again, I just want to be clear, do y'all want to, is there a distinction you want to make between buses? Do we want to say, I don't know if you say, what the difference is if you say required, you know, as appropriate, or when in congested areas. I'm not real sure of the distinction between strongly encouraged. Or are we going to say required for students and staff when in the presence of others, or when you can't social distance? I mean, if you're out in the cafeteria, we can intentionally social distance. Again, I'm just asking for clarification. I want to make sure we're all
subjective,
It does, every time you get into it. Yeah.
It makes it even harder, of course.
Well, yeah.
Well, we can designate classroom versus, you know, between classes, buses, those kinds of things. I mean,
We can, and I do understand the thought there. I think if we're not careful, we're gonna get into a situation where now we're trying to list all of the potential areas. I mean, I think the clearer we can be, the better off everybody's gonna be.
Well, it's the way the plan's drafted,
It is.
a lot of the things are up to the facility directors to make appropriate determinations. And what might be appropriate at one elementary school might not be the same thing at the high school or one of the middle schools. But as we've discussed a billion times over the last years, there's a difference between a ministerial and a discretionary act, and we have immunity for discretionary acts. So we need to leave it where it's open enough. And I think the plan and I'll be glad to help come up with the plan, but if the board's consensus is face coverings are mandatory of all students and all staff, and we can put in some general exceptions if, you know, in the event that social distancing is appropriate and endorsed by the facilities director. I mean, so I don't think the plan has to list every specific exception and exemption, because the people y'all got running these schools should be charged with responsibly doing so.
I don't think we get in a position where, and we talk about one lounge, one school system. I don't want 7 different elementary schools and 7 different elementary schools.
No, I don't mean that they're not going to enforce a teacher wearing a face covering. What I'm talking about is, this is a classroom that there's only 5 kids, it's a special ed classroom or something, that the kids are, you know, separated, that they may not be required in every instance in that specific classroom. You're not going to be able to put that in a plan. I mean, that's just.
Why don't we state that masks are required by all folks inside the building unless certain specific situations are deemed exempt from this based on the situation, based on that situation which is agreed by the system, by the in-house administrative principal and staff. Therefore, you know, especially in classrooms, or a classroom with only 5 kids in there, you know, whatever. We say, okay, you know, you say, oh, we got 5 in this class, and we take the mask off. And Ms. McCall would say, yes, as long as you only got not over 10 in here, you social distance, you can take your things off, but you better have them when you leave the classroom. Get back home, you know, that kind
Well,
of.
if you're giving every principal in every building that authority, why not just say it's strongly recommended and let that principal make that decision in the classroom?
Well, then are we gonna let the principal make a decision that she's gonna mandate for her school? And then might this principal here might not mandate for her school? Well, then you gotta do it.
Well, essentially, what you're talking about, that's essentially what we're doing.
No,
We're
we're
basically
talking about one or two, maybe specific few classes. The high school probably the biggest place, it's so many classrooms, you know. But that, you know, if it's a special ed class and it just does not fit there, then you don't have to have it in this, maybe in this classroom. But, you know, that would be something that is not unmanageable, I wouldn't say, you know. Because it's not going to, because if you also have the rule where if you say you're going to be virtual, you got to be virtual for a semester, then it ain't like it's going to change from day to day, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be a while, it'll be the same situation for a while.
Ms. McCall, what's the penalty for a dress code violation in high school?
We use the progressive discipline plan, so the first time it's a warning.
Okay, so we're not talking about sending a kid home for not wearing a mask.
Yeah, the second
Make
time.
part of the dress code, we follow a warning.
Second.
There's several steps. I mean, it's not like we're gonna
Yes.
catch a kid going down the hallway not wearing a mask and toss them out of class. But it makes it somewhat enforceable. We're not gonna catch every.
But also, I think something like this is a whole different category than a cell phone or a short skirt or whatever. I mean, this is something
At
that,
least you catch their attention.
you know, you're only affecting yourself with the cell phone or a short skirt or whatever it is, you know, with the dress code thing. But with this, you're talking about something that affects everybody else in the classroom. So, I mean, this is a whole different ballgame to me. You know, when you think about it.
The real thing that mandatory does versus strongly suggest is if it's mandatory, and y'all mentioned that there are repercussions.
Consequences.
And so it creates a situation where someone can't be obstinate and refuse to wear a mask to make a statement. And we're talking about kids who are learning how to become individuals and learn their voice. And so if you've got a kid who's just like, my gosh, I'm not gonna wear a mask because I don't care if I infect anybody. You see people going to COVID parties. If they've got doing that, they have the tools then to say, oh, you are if you're gonna be in school.
Lauren, could you test everyone walking in the building?
Sure.
Their temperature?
Sure.
Doesn't take but about 5 seconds.
Why can't we do that?
I think that would be the cost and the time coming in. We could also do like the international airports doing some that has the scan boxes up that can do hundreds of people. You know, you'd have to have a cattle call temperature check, you know.
That's useless as a yard dog and I don't know what.
Right, but what I'm saying is that,
You can be symptom free for 14 days.
I'm just saying, can you do it? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just the amount of the time and the expense of doing it.
I mean, you can sit there and say, got temperature click, put down the, you have temperature vial. That doesn't solve anything.
No, I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying, but yes, legally we could do that.
Listen, how much sense does it make to have, you know, if we got 3,000 kids, I'm just gonna use the high school, have, you know, 1,000 of them walking around wearing a mask, 2,000 of them walking around not wearing one. It's to the point, you just about either got to all put them on or all take them off, or they ain't doing it good.
That's one.
Well, I paraphrased what you.
Okay, so we kind of reached a consensus here that, this is not a vote at this point, and later we will just be, endorsing the plan of the school system.
Well, the address will be voted on as the
Code of
code
conduct,
of conduct.
next meeting.
And all.
But I do think, again, in fairness to students, parents, all of our staff, if that's what we're going to do, we need to be able to, as I said in the beginning, to be of one accord, that when we publish this tonight, that is the expectation going forward. Because, and again, I'm just trying to be fair and representative, because I've told you, I've heard from both ends of the spectrum. If that is required, that may get some students to school that decided they weren't coming if it wasn't enforced. That may also say to some, I'm not sending them if you think you're gonna tell me what to do. I'm just being realistic in terms of, that's representative of what I've heard in our own community. So all I'm asking for is clarification to make sure that when we publish this with any changes out of this meeting, that we're clear. And I'm looking at Ms. Wiltshire. We can wordsmith this and clean it up. I just want to make sure that the intent is what is representative of what you all are asking. If we're saying strongly encouraged or recommended is out and required is in, we'll wordsmith it and clean it up. I just need to know that's where we are, if that is in fact where we are.
That would be my motion if you would vote on it.
Yeah, I think we need to vote.
We're not voting at this point, but,
But I'm saying,
but I understand
if
we,
he wants consensus, we gotta have
I
consensus.
don't know the direction
I'm
of the
just
board,
saying, that's
which
what I
means
said.
at least 4 of you, if not 6.
well, like I said, this is uncharted territory. I think we've got to err on the side of caution and safety first. And then if we can remove them down the road,
I'd sure rather 6 months and say,
Yes.
well, that was useless.
Right.
Gosh, I wish we would have.
right. We just may have to be inconvenienced a little while until, you know, if we save one life, that's.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have. You know, I came out the other day and parked at this end of the stadium and watched a little bit of practice with no pads, no helmet. One of the tall receivers was wearing a face mask. I mean, he was the only one out there that had one on. And if they can put them on out there, I guess we can put them on everywhere else.
And I'd like to say something else too, because it really ticked me off, to tell you the truth. I was in town one evening a week or two ago, and on a Saturday night or something, I don't even know what it was. Anyway, there was, I bet you, 50 or 75 high school kids all piled up in front of where the Toys R Us closed in that parking lot, all piled up there carrying on in England, not a mask amongst them. So I think maybe parents need to take a little bit of authority on this thing too, and not leave it up to the school system and everybody else to mandate to their children what to do. Be a parent to tell your kid what to do, and make them do it.
Again, I'm asking Mr. Chairman, as I go around, Johnson, you good with the mask? Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that you have 4 if not 5.
Mandatory requirement, I'm good with the strongly recommended.
Ronnie, you good? All right, so I'm hearing y'all, we're gonna wordsmith that. Again, this, if we decide we're moving on, that change, we'll say something along the lines of required for students and staff. And wordsmith if you can with it, Ms. Wiltshire, you've heard all the conversation. All right, thank y'all, and I knew it would be healthy conversation, thoughts, important decisions. This has been tough, but
Hey, I have one
Well, I
more
wasn't
question about the
trying to
plan,
end it. Okay.
different subject.
yeah, I wasn't trying to end it.
Why did we decide to designate if a elementary student goes virtual, they have to do it for 9 weeks, and for middle school and high school, they have to do it for a semester?
Mr. Green, you want to speak to that? I think that came out of one of the early committee meetings, but you want to speak to that decision?
Yes, sir. What we wanted to do, we tried to replicate the expectations of Georgia Virtual School. And now, if a middle or high school student enrolls in Georgia Virtual School, there is a semester-long commitment there for that program. For our elementary student, if that elementary student starts in the virtual program and begins to struggle, we want to get that student back in the classroom as quickly as possible. We don't want to wait until December to pull that student back in. We would much rather get that student back in the classroom in front of a teacher, face-to-face, sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
And good question, and I will say again, most of y'all know, I like a plan, and I like to know where we're going and what we're doing, and I like boundaries and guidelines, but I'm just being realistic. I said this to the principals last Tuesday. There are going to be exceptions. We're going to have kids get sick. We're going to need some that are going to need to come back and forth, and I'm telling you, we're going to be flexible on that for the, again, the benefit of the child as well as the students. What else? I was not trying to.
That was it.
I just wanted to hopefully bring closure to that one item. What other concerns or questions do you have?
Anything else on the place? As presented?
Superintendent Taylor, can I ask one clarification too? You guys stated that there will not be a virtual option for pre-K. How was that decided, being that they have at least like 22 students? And it'll be even more so harder to social distance? And I know personally, I have a pre-K and then I have a kindergarten, and I wanted to opt for the virtual option, and they were prepared for it. I'm prepared to assist.
Okay, fine. Well, if you want, can you just address that? But ma'am, I would just say that this is not the portion that we can ask questions, but I mean, I understand your concern. Is there anything you can say there?
I think I can point her to somebody that can help her. After the meeting, if you don't know who Ms. Julie Klein is, she is our pre-K expert, and there is a good explanation for that. So if you recognize who she is, she will be glad to help you understand that. Good question.
We understand your concern, but we just
Yes.
don't take questions or, you know, at this point, so, but thank you for your input. Everybody good then on, we can move on? Wes, I did just wanna, say thank you to you and the staff. I mean, y'all have worked countless hours in putting this plan together. It has not been easy. It's been a challenge, and I know there's been a lot of time spent. And, with the circumstances, we do not know, like you said, there's gonna be multiple changes, I feel like it, that are either forced on us or that we need to make. We don't know. It's uncharted territory, and I think all we can do is what y'all done is try to put the best possible plan out there. And I appreciate y'all's time and efforts in doing that.
And I'd just like to say one more time, thank you. Y'all know I'm just the guy that happens to, where did Mr. Christie go, get to sit on the front of the bus, so to speak. We got lots of good help, and I do believe that over the course of my career, that's one of my strengths, is I hire well, and we got a lot of folks that are a whole lot smarter than I am. There's a lot of people who've spent, as you mentioned, countless hours, and we have been back and forth. I'll tell y'all again, the priority is the safety of all of our folks, and this has not been easy. It has been an emotional journey, and we've been back and forth. I'm telling y'all, we have been back and forth, and these principals have too. I mean, I'm looking around the room, most everybody in here has played some part in this development, but it has. It's been an arduous task.
And I know everybody's got their own opinion of the virus and where we should go and what we should do, and it's not easy. So, I mean, I understand. We're trying to make one decision that covers, 10,000 plus students. So, thank you for what you've done there.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to item number 7. Gentlemen, as you are well aware, our District 6 seat has been vacant for some time, especially with now the importance of decisions like this that we're having to make, and that we will be making. I feel it's a very important and imperative that we have that seat filled by someone that would be representing District 6. Also, as you all know, Amy Stepps qualified and was duly elected back in May at the election to take office in January. You know, I think it's basically my opinion now, and we'll ask for an action item later. But I would like to see that us appoint Amy to that position to fill the unexpired term for the rest of this year. I think she's the most logical person, as she'll be taking that seat officially in January. So I just wanted to discuss this now. If there's any discussion, we will actually vote later in an action item, but I just want to bring that up, so.
Makes all sense, Nora?
Can't we make a motion to add that to the consent agenda?
Well, we've got a separate action item, so it will be voted on later. Okay, we just want to bring it up in discussion, so. Any other discussion of that item? Okay. All right, good. We will move on now. We do have a section of public participation. I think we had a couple of individuals that signed up for participation tonight.
Ms. Miranda Edmonds was the first one. Ms. Edmonds, if you make your way to the podium, and Mr. Smith will just remind you of a couple of pieces.
Would just like to remind you, Ms. Edmonds, if you would, state your name and the reason for approaching the board, and just reminder that there's a 3-minute time limit set by board policy, and we would just like you to address the board as a whole, and we generally will not answer any questions or respond. However, we would ask Mr. Taylor to follow up with any concerns.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Miranda Edmonds, and I teach at Lowndes High School. I'm here tonight to represent a group of faculty and staff employed throughout Lowndes County Schools who are concerned about the lack of teacher voice and input in the creation of the county school reopening plan. Make no mistake, we want to teach and we want students to return to school safely. However, we want to ensure that we will work in an environment that is safe and healthy to us and our families. The policies and procedures created by our school leaders and voted on by our board guides our work day. As teachers and staff, we are on the front lines with large amounts of student contact day in and day out. While we recognize that creating a school reopening plan is way beyond our pay grade, we would at least appreciate a seat at the table. Our group is advocating for a delayed start to the school year. As one member stated, a delayed reopening in order to properly train teachers and staff on distance learning and new protocols is ideal. Page has recommended at least 10 days of faculty and staff pre-planning. However, we would argue that more time is needed. From March until May, educators and school leaders responded to the COVID-19 school closure with crisis teaching. With short notice and an ever-evolving crisis, we did the best that we could do. We rightfully asked for grace over grades as we all struggled to meet student needs. We did the best that we could at that time, but we cannot force our students, teachers, and parents into a situation where crisis teaching is the best that we can do. We can do so much better. With a delayed start, teachers and staff, including paraprofessionals, can receive the professional learning needed to best support our students digitally. Group members have identified professional learning needs for the following areas: assisting academically at-risk students online, holding IEP meetings digitally, supporting and mentoring new teachers, teaching online using best practices, helping students who receive special education services, creating engaging lessons, and conducting tutoring and remediation, just to name a few. A delayed start can give us time to address these issues with intention in order to deliver better instruction. As my 3 minutes come to a close, or have already elapsed, I wanted to leave on a remark made by a member of the group. And basically it boiled down to, we thought we were doing a good job, but we weren't. And there's so much that we can do to help support online instruction through a delayed start. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Chairman, the second one was, Ms. Treva Gear, who had signed up.
Ms. Tribune. Thank you, Ms. Gear. If you'll remember the 3 minutes, thank you so much.
Well, this is kind of similar to, thank you all for having me. This is kind of what we would look like in the classroom had we use face shields. By thank goodness all of you have your mask on. So that makes it safer for me, the educator. So today I stand before you, as Ms. Evans said, on behalf of Lowndes County school teachers and staff who are concerned about safe reopening of schools and our lack of involvement directly in the reopening and kind of knowing what was going on. As Ms. Edmonds said about the delayed opening, it is critical because right now here in Valdosta we are a hot spot. So I'm going to speak to the safety. And as we ask our students to actually respect the data and use critical thinking skills, we also ask you all to continue to do that. So I was happy about the conversation about the mask. Right now, since the 14th, we have had 293 more cases in this past week. It's only required to have 100 additional cases in a week in order to be considered a hot spot, and 10% positivity over the past week. So those are things we're concerned about. We have a limited number of critical care beds here in the area, and only 111 hospitalizations just over the past 24 hours. So we are concerned as educators about our lives, the lives of our students, and the lives of our families and our students' families, because we know, as you all talked about with the buses, interaction, 3 different kids from 3 different schools with 3 different guidelines about masks can lead to a whole lot of communication of infection and other things, and flu season is coming. Based upon the COVID risk assessment tool developed by Georgia Tech, it tells us that if you have 35 people in a room, there's 81% chance that you can get your risk of COVID. If there's 100, that's a greater than 99% chance. So therefore, those of us at the schoolhouse or middle school or high school, we are facing that many students in a sea of the hallway. So those are things to be considered. And right now, the chances of getting COVID are very high. We already have current staff members who are already in quarantine or either have been exposed in some manner and are waiting on tests. And testing is delayed for 7 to 10 days. So what I wanted to say is that even looking at the school bus, that's like a COVID caravan. And we got to protect our bus drivers because they're also exposed in that risk. These are a few questions that we had, and I'm happy for the mask consideration because if everybody is not wearing a mask, we cannot ensure that anyone is protected and safe at any given time of the day or during the week. So those masks are critical. So I thank you, board members, for making those considerations for us. But we have other questions like if we get sick and we're out, we get COVID, what will cover that? Will that be covered by workers' compensation because it's a hazard? Or will we have to use our sick leave? And not to mention the bill. We don't want to lose our lives, nor do we want to make our family members sick or our students' families sick. So it's inevitable that it will spread. So we're asking that we adhere to the best guidelines, the best safety guidelines, because we as educators understand that no decision is perfect. But there's a best decision, and also depends on what type of collateral damage we want to deal with. Will it be the loss of lung capacity, lifelong health issues, or the loss of life? But thank you for allowing us this 3 minutes to share my concerns with the teachers and the staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we'll move on to item H, which is the approval of the consent agenda. If you remember, we've got the nutrition items, the finance report, Title I, and of course, the endorsement of the plan that we discussed, reopening plan. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve that with changes as we talked about.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Or Mr. Johnson as opposing the consent agenda.
So, item I guess is on the action agenda.
Yes.
All right, I will.
Well, okay, yeah, we'll move to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. So it's consent agenda. So,
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we open up the nominations for District 6 seat is vacant currently, and entertain nominations for that.
all right, so we've got a motion to open nominations. I need a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor to open the nominations? Aye. All right, do we have a nomination
I recommend Ms. Amy Spence.
Second.
I make a motion to close the nomination.
We need to do that first. We got a motion, we need a second to close nominations.
Second.
So we've got a motion and a second to close the nominations. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, now they gotta vote
No,
to.
we need to vote. We need to finish it up. All in favor of appointing Amy to come on, she will actually be sworn in at the next available meeting, which will be the August work session. And she will be a voting member, official member of the board, and officially, as the appointment, and then she will officially take her seat for the election in January, so.
Just to clarify, she is filling the unexpired term and then taking her normal seat in January.
Yes, we are appointing the unexpired term that goes until December of this year. She ran for election, so all we are doing is appointing her to the end of the year, and then she officially takes the seat. So we had a motion and a second. Did I get the vote?
So,
Unanimous? Okay.
I apologize for getting ahead. I've had a number of superintendent colleagues from around the state as we've been talking through this for weeks, keep telling me as we end the conversation, when you have an epiphany about what we should be doing about this plan, call me. So maybe that was just an epiphany. You don't know you now. That's the closest thing I've had to this plan.
For our council, we had to follow the,
Absolutely.
follow the
Get it right.
procedure. So we do need to move to item J, personnel recommendations. Gentlemen, y'all presented personnel list.
Does anybody need a paper copy? Anybody else? Anybody need a paper copy? While y'all look at that, Mr. Smith, if I might,
Yeah.
while Ms. Stevens is here, while y'all take a minute and look at that.
You'll sit here now.
Hey, you'll stay here.
Nope, should be right here.
You're right there.
Oh, I thought you.
I get to sit by you, Dad.
You can help me.
I thought you sat between.
She's prettier than you.
That's why I didn't want her on the end.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel list as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Got a motion and a second to approve the personnel list as recommended. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. Other business?
No, sir.
No.
If that's the case, I'll make a motion to adjourn this business.
I was thinking. Congratulations.
Motion